Welcome to Broadway Drumming 101. And my guest today is Q Robinson. I interviewed him July of 2021. Welcome back to the podcast, Q.
Thank you, sir. A pleasure to be here.
I was telling you offline that I decided to go back through my podcast episodes and re-release them as classics because I think a lot of people didn't even know certain people were already on the podcast. So I'm going through and I put out Bill Lanham, Damian Bassman, and I look back and I was like, wait a minute, Q is number 3 back in 2021. I can't put this stuff out because at the time I was talking to you and you were in your basement, your studio at home,
Yeah.
and you've done way more since July of 2021. Wait, before you go back, you said something also that was kind of interesting. We met February of 2019.
Yes.
And let's go back to that point, and then we'll get to July of 2021. How did
Okay.
we meet?
So, how did we meet? So, I was in New York doing a reading with a musical that has Broadway aspirations, and Rashidra, who was the original Josephine on Ain't Too Proud, was in that show, and she was like, "What are you doing tonight?" I was like, "I think I want to go and see a show." And she was like, "Oh, you should just come and see Ain't Too Proud." I was like, "Okay, bet. I'll get a ticket or whatever." So I didn't have a phone number or anything like that. So after I got my ticket, I DM'd her on IG and I was like, "Hey, I made it. Great show." She was like, "Don't leave. I want to introduce you to someone." And I guess she went and grabbed you. I met you for the first time in February of 2019. And in true New York drummer fashion, the first thing you said to me was, "I already got all of my subs."
That's probably what I said. I know it's kind of funny, but it is typical of what everybody says, though. You know what I
Yeah.
started thinking? Was it
It wasn't 2020 because 2020 is when I subbed the show for you.
you came in February of 2019?
So maybe it was March, but it was February or March. It was very cold. So if you
Mm.
opened in March of 2019, it could have been March of 2019.
Either
But I
way,
remember it was cold because remember, we met, we was like, I got all of my subs. And then maybe like a couple of weeks later, you called me and said, "Hey, the next time you're up here, why don't you come and sit in the pit?"
that's
You know,
right.
one of my subs came in trying to bring stuff to the table instead of just eating from the table. And so you sent me the book. And, I was still touring people and all those people, but I remember in the summer kind of buckling down and was like, you know what, let me crack this book open, let me see. And I remember sending you like 5 songs of me record. I recorded 5 songs of me playing the stuff. And that was October. Let me back up. That summer, you guys got nominated for like 11 Tony Awards or something like that. I think ended up winning one. And I think within the same week of those Tony announcements, they announced that they were doing a national tour. And you hit me and you were like, "Hey, I think you would be great for the tour. Do you mind if I throw your hat in the ring?" And I was like, "Sure." So then I was like, "Well, let me open the book. Let me check it out." And I remember recording like 5 songs, 5 of the more difficult songs, drum heavy songs. And I sent that to you and you sent it to Kenny. And then at that point, it was just about scheduling to play the show for Kenny essentially. But because no one knew that COVID was coming, Kenny was on and off the road, going to different cities, like I guess kind of marketing the show, like doing some live performances. And we settled on the last Sunday in February of 2020. It was February the 26th, which was 2 weeks before the world shut down.
So that's when you subbed for the first time?
I subbed for you for the first time. I remember coming in, watching you on that Thursday. And then I went to see Tina that Friday, came back and watched both shows on that Saturday. And then between the matinee and the evening show, you essentially sat me down on the kid. He was like, "All right, number one, let's go." I'll play a couple of bars. You'd be like, "Oh, nope, that's good. Next song, next song." And we did that with the entire book. and you allowed me to ask you as many questions as I wanted to. And after you left that that Saturday night, you was like, "All right, it's on you.
Good luck.
Don't screw it up." And that was it. The next time I heard from you was that Monday, and you were like, "Have you heard from John Miller?" Because I didn't hear anything from anybody.
Mm.
Like Kenny essentially was like, "Good job." You gave me a couple of notes on a couple of things that kind of happened because of the fan fiasco of 2020.
So
And
really quickly, I had a drum booth. I call it a drum cube, and outside of the cube is an air conditioner that funneled air into the drum booth, basically. And you had to know how to work it, and that's one thing I didn't tell Q about. I don't think, like, to turn it on.
no, I turned it on. Something happened and the propellers in the air condition broke, broke in the middle of Act One.
So he had to
Um,
play the entire Act One.
I don't remember. It was a nice lady in wardrobe because where your cube was, like you literally had to fight through the jackets to get to your little cube.
Yes.
And she heard the air condition malfunction
Mm,
and she went and got someone from props.
mm,
And if you remember your door, you kind of really had to pull it shut. If not, it would kind of open.
mm-hmm.
And I remember the door swinging open. And I'm like, oh my God, like I left the door open, not knowing that props came and opened the door to let some air in because they didn't have another air conditioning unit.
Mm.
So I thought I didn't shut the door, secure the door. So I got up in the middle. It was a ball of confusion in that little break. I went to close the door, and by the time I put in my ears, I couldn't get the like so. That was the
No.
one note that I that's the note that I got because by the time I put in my ears, the two indicators on the hi-hat had that moment had passed.
Dang.
Uh, So
Okay, good.
like no one died.
Segregation.
Like no one died outside of the people in the story that passed.
So you wound up being a successful sub for the show.
Yes.
Then stuff got shut down. And
Yeah.
then you were offered the opportunity to do the tour.
hmm
When was the tour going out at that point?
December, December of 2021. We started boot camp in October, and then we did tech in November, Thanksgiving weekend, and then we did a preview in Durham, North Carolina for a week, and then we opened at the Kennedy Center, which was kind of full circle because that's where you guys kind of broke all of the records. But we were in the bigger room. I call it the red room,
Mm,
at the Kennedy Center. Funny story about that, because if you think about it, like COVID was running roughshod. We were supposed to do 5 weeks. We only ended up doing 3 weeks because uh, there was a COVID outbreak. We're getting ready to click off the first song of lobby rehearsal with the locals. And our coordinator runs in, and the entire band, with the exception of myself, had contracted COVID.
mm,
I was the only one that didn't get it. So we were shut down for 2 weeks.
mm.
So, yeah, unfortunately, the week we finally opened was the same week that they gave closing notice for, you guys on
Oh,
Broadway.
really?
Yeah, it was
Uh,
it was very
so
weird.
I choose not to ever
I
really go
I
back there.
but yeah, so that was December, and I did the tour, was loving. I learned a lot about myself. And the interesting thing about this tour is because we picked up we picked up more orchestra members than we carried. We carried a rhythm section. And so we would pick up the three horns and the strings and two percussionists. And it was very interesting going into these different markets and, you know, having to play this music with various people from different parts of the country. Met a lot of cool people. that way. What better way to meet other percussionists than on a show that has so much to do with rhythm and percussion and drums, right?
Hmm.
So for me, it was definitely a learning experience in how to communicate without offending. A lot of times in music, we can be, what's right is right, and however you feel about it, it don't matter as long as you play it right. But like finding ways to convey, be an effective communicator without offending. It's a tightrope that if I didn't have to engage with the local musicians, I don't know if I would have learned that lesson. It was extremely just trying to find that balance of being effective, but also understanding that there's a level of pride that these individuals have for not only being called for the show, but being good at what they do. And a lot of times the people that I was talking to were 15, 20 years my senior, so like talking to older individuals about what we're trying to capture and the approach.
Mm. So you've done tours in the past. What are the biggest differences that you've seen?
How long you sit in the city. Typically, if you're doing a traditional tour or a pop or rock tour, if you get a full day in the city, you're doing good. With this type of touring that we're doing now, I'm in the city no less than 2 weeks. So it allows you to kind of absorb the culture of the city. You know, it's not as strenuous as being in a new city every other night or every other day. It's a bit more relaxed, but it's still necessary. It's needed simply because these shows take so much out of you, put so much of yourself into these shows 2.5, 3 hours a night, 8 times a week, especially on those two show days where you have to do all of this stuff and you have to be emotionally invested to make sure that, especially for me with drums, like these shows that we're doing now, especially where musicals are going now, drums are not an afterthought. It's no longer just, oh, we got the rhythm section, so let's get drums. It matters who the drummer is, it matters how the drummer plays more now than ever, because a lot of times these orchestrators are leading with the drums. Like these are very drum heavy shows. The more popular shows are very drum heavy. So to be able to give of yourself for 3 hours and then get maybe like a 2, 3 hour break and then have to give that same energy once again, it's exhausting. I can't even imagine doing that and then traveling the next day to do it all over again. So having some time, you know, in a city allows you to kind of, when you're not doing the show, you can kind of relax and kind of get your bearings about you. So I would say that's probably the biggest reason that comes to mind. I'm pretty sure there are others.
Do you find yourself being a tourist in each city that you haven't been to and trying local cuisine and doing a lot of sightseeing?
Depends on the city, depends on the day. I have done that. I have been a person that becomes a recluse and, I'll play my PS5 or read a book, but it just kind of depends on the city. There are certain places that I've been able to go where it's just certain things you have to do. Like being in Cleveland, I had to go to Cedar Point. It's the roller coaster. It had like the world's fastest roller coaster. Like one of the roller coasters held like 10 world records. So we
Mm.
were like an hour and a half away. So a bunch of company members, we decided to rent cars and go to Sandusky, Ohio and check it out. Yeah. So places like that, or being in Buffalo and being 20 minutes from Niagara Falls, like, how could you not be that close? And I had never been.
Mm.
So, to be afforded these opportunities to do these things in essentially not on my own dime, Now there have been some cities I won't say because I'm not trying to throw shade on cities. There are just some cities like, nah, this hotel room is pretty nice. I think I'm gonna stay in. you know, you know. But
uh,
it depends on the city. It depends on the time of year. If it's super hot outside or it's super cold, I'm I'm not going anywhere.
one place I haven't been to yet is Phoenix.
Bro, we were in Tempe
Mm.
um, during June and July. It was 105 at night.
At night, really?
At night.
Oh
It was
man.
like to the point, like by the stage door, they had these huge, maybe like 8 foot industrial fans with a water hose connected to it that would like shoot out a mist for the individuals that were, doing security. It was very, very hot. And it was a dry heat. So, being from Florida, I never understood what that meant. I didn't even understand like humidity. What do you mean? Hot is hot until you go to a place like Dallas, Texas, which we were in the summer, and then Tempe right after that. It's a different type of heat. It's definitely a
Mm,
different type of heat. Give me 95 and humid more so than a dry 95, you know.
okay.
I guess because I grew up in it, it doesn't affect me the same way it affects
Hmm.
other people.
And you were out with that for how long?
A year.
And then what happened and how did you deal with that?
Oh, in April of 2022, I get a call from a friend of mine. His name is Sam Merrick. And Sam at the time was playing Hamilton Phillip tour, and he had been working on a musical, and Juliet was opening on Broadway. And he was like, "Hey man, just calling to see if you would be interested in potentially taking over this chair. I got some things happening in the fall, and looks like I'll be leaving the tour." And in this business, we've talked about this before. When your opportunities come, you say yes and you figure the rest out. And I was like, yeah, sure, because I knew it wasn't a linear path. I knew there would be some level of audition or other people that would be interested in doing the gig. So he gets me in contact with the Michael Aarons, who's one of my favorite people in the world. And he gets in contact with me and sends me the sheet music for 5 songs. And it's like, I need you to record yourself playing these 5 songs. And I just need click and drums. And that was a bit difficult simply because I wasn't in my home studio. I was on the road, you know. So I recorded myself and I had a week to do it. And maybe about 2 or 3 weeks later, I got a call saying, offering me the chair for Hamilton. And initially I turned it down because with Ain't Too Proud being my first tour, I didn't want to upset the Broadway gods of commitment. And like the first thing that John Miller, the contractor for Ain't Too Proud, before he goes through anything else, the first thing on the email says, "We are asking for at least a 1 year commitment." So in my head, it's like I have to do at least a year. And I didn't think that, the creative team for Hamilton would wait. And I had a conversation with Michael Aarons about that. I was like, I would love to do it. I was like, but I gave my word that I would do a year and I have to do the year. And Mike Aarons said to me, and sometimes that doesn't work. All the time it doesn't work out. They'll just go to the next available. But Mike Aarons said to me, it's like we knew we had the right person musically, but the mere fact that you're willing to leave money on the table to honor your word lets me know that we have the right person for the job. They graciously held the chair for me, and they had a series of subs to sub the tour on Hamilton until my time came. And, I took 2 weeks off from Ain't Too Proud at the end and walked right into Hamilton. So I've been with Hamilton since November of 2022.
So what was the first city that you played on the Hamilton tour and what was your first show experience like?
Okay. And so it was Detroit, Michigan, and we were at
Is that
the
one of those
Fisher
cities
Theater.
where you look up and you're like, I think I'll stay?
No, so I will tell you this. It was very special for a couple of reasons because in August of that same year, we were there with Ain't Too Proud for like 3 weeks. And that was kind of like the second opening, especially with Motown, it being
Oh yeah.
Motown
Hmm.
and, the whole red carpet thing. And that was the most time that we had actually spent in a city since DC. And by that time, I already knew that I would be transitioning in the fall to Hamilton. So Detroit was the place where I found the studio. I rented out a studio for like 2 of those 3 weeks. And from like 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock, I was running the Hamilton stuff and then taking a break, eating dinner, and then going to the opera house to do Ain't Too Proud. And I did that for 2 weeks. Without those 2 weeks, I would not have been ready for Hamilton. And there's so many incredible musicians, so many people that I know in the city. And Detroit is just one of those places. And then also having like the private viewing of the Motown Museum, and you know, it was great. The thing that kept me on the inside in Detroit was the snow. So anyway, it was the Fisher Theater, which is a very small theater. Like there's one way in and one way out of the pit, right? And I'm in a drum booth, and because it was my first city, the conductor was really adamant about having the drummer in the pit so that I could kind of see, so that we could feel we're still trying to learn each other. Because what a lot of people don't know about any of these Broadway shows is that while there's the written music and the interpretation of that, there's a lot of nuance between the drummer and the conductor, knowing where the conductor wants a particular thing. And I think a lot of times that's why you see conductors use the same people all the time. That's why you're one of Kenny's first calls. Not only are you an amazing drummer, but you know him and you know his idiosyncrasies as a conductor. 9 times out of 10, when he's arranging, he probably has you in mind simply because you guys work together, have been working together, and you guys work together so well. So, when you look at different arrangers and conductors, it's not a click, so to speak. It's just that person knows that person. And with so many different things to contend with, it's just easier to have someone. Well, yeah, I could give this guy a chance, but like Clayton's here, and I don't have to think when Clayton's in the chair. So anyway, back to the story. So they had me in the pit, and I didn't know anybody. Coming in to a culture that's already set and just trying to find your way. I felt very isolated. Everybody was nice, but I didn't know anybody. And, coming off of Ain't Too Proud, starting that experience, being there from day one in the first choreography boot camp, and with everything that we went through between, the COVID shutdown and, when we're in Buffalo, right down the street, that mass shooting that happened at the grocery store, we were in Buffalo right down the street. So there was a lot of trauma bonding that happened. And there's a lot of things that kind of brought us together. And me being there from day one, I was a part of one of the people that helped set the culture and the energy in the room. And so leaving that to go to a place where I'm assimilating to a culture that's already been set. The Hamilton Phillip tour had been going on since 2018, into 2017, going into 2018. Like these people knew each other. And I was just this new guy, this outsider coming in, assuming the role of, a very beloved member of their orchestra because I didn't know anybody, so I was homesick, so to speak. I missed my Ain't Too Proud family. And you and a few other people I would call, just kind of like, man, what to do, But the first week of that show, because Hamilton is a 3-hour show, uh, I want to say maybe at least 3 times that week, we did the short exit music. On my first night, we did the short exit music, which was not in my book. It hadn't been given to me. So conductor comes on the mic and says, "Hey Q, we're gonna do the short exit music. Are you ready for that?" I was like, I didn't know what he was talking about. I thought he was joking. And because I didn't know it, we ended up doing no exit music whatsoever. It's very low,
Hmm.
So just imagine like there's nothing after the bows, it's no music, everybody's just leaving. It felt kind of weird. And then that same week there was a medical emergency where we had to stop the show because somebody stopped breathing in the audience.
Mm.
And then also in that week I felt like the new toy that everybody wanted to play with, because my first week I played that show with 4 different conductors.
Mm.
So it was the conductor, the associate conductor, the music tech, and then we had a subconductor come in. So it was very, very stressful.
Mm.
But Broadway, baby, it's where you eat your young. It's sink or swim. So,
That's true.
and I didn't get a rehearsal. I got a longer sound check. So the day that I
Mm.
took over the show, I came in on that Monday. I watched one of the subs that Tuesday and Wednesday, and I took over that Thursday. So they did a call so that I could switch out the drums, change drum heads, kind of because I'm a lefty, set up the drums to my specifications. And that went right into additional band seatings where we just kind of hit tops and tails of every song, which goes to show like, anybody that's listening that has aspirations to do any type of music, but specifically play music on Broadway, you got to study to show yourself approved. Because had I not done my homework, had I not done the work on my own, I would have been screwed and the show would have been screwed. There was no rehearsal. It was essentially a longer sound check. So the onus is always on you to make sure that you're prepared in every possible way. So be over prepared. And I tried to do that and I made it through, so to speak.
When I was doing the workshops and out of town tryouts of Ain't Too Proud, I just considered having a 5-piece drum set and 3 cymbals. I didn't have any extra snares. I didn't, unfortunately, wasn't able to have electronic premium. And, since 2019, a lot of musicians post their setups.
Mhm,
They have maybe a 6-piece drum set with 2 toms, and they have
mhm,
17 cymbals and an extra snare. First of all, I didn't really need that for Ain't Too Proud,
mhm.
even though I wanted the electronic premium, but I couldn't get it. That's a whole
Right,
other story. But to play the kind of music that was required for that show, I didn't need much more than that. I
right.
interviewed Andres Ferrero, Dina
Mhm,
Torriello, Alex Giosa, Juan
mhm.
Felipe Mayorga, and Ryan McCall.
Yeah,
And
the Holy
during
Grail.
during that group roundtable discussion, the first question I asked them, it's like I noticed because when I watched Andres play the show, then I saw it for the first time. I was like, there are 5 snare drums. So I asked, out of all the 5 snare drums, which was their favorite one to play. Dina and others had reasons why it was their favorite, and they had a story behind one particular snare drum. Do you have a particular favorite one to
It's
play in the
probably
show?
I have a 1A and a 1B.
Mm,
The 1A is definitely the field drum. Like, how often do you get a chance to play a 16-inch snare drum?
mm.
I think for me, the thing about that, and in theater, whether you hit it once or you hit it a million times, authenticity plays a very, very, very important role in what we do. So for me, that snare drum and how it's tuned, it gives authenticity to the piece. For me, I think the other one for me is the piccolo snare.
That's what Dina said too.
It's the piccolo snare. It's not only because it's different, but a lot of times it's just it just pops and it's like it gets your attention, especially when it's tuned just right. More of the popular songs, it's the piccolo snare more so than the main snare.
Did you bring your drum set on the tour?
No, I was fortunate enough that I inherited most of the drum kit that I'm playing, which is the Pro kit, which I proudly endorse their products. So when I took over the chair, I called my rep and we just kind of like updated things. So I brought my own main snare out. And because I'm a lefty, there were just other things that I needed to kind of convert the kit over into being left-handed. Like
Mm-hmm.
the popcorn snare that they use is 12 inches, but because my ride kind of sits on the left side, I needed something smaller in diameter. And so Pro made me a 4 by 10 inch popcorn snare as opposed to the 12-inch that they started to tour with.
Now,
Also, the
but
depth. Mhm.
Your main snare is like 70,000 ply, right?
It's a 20 ply snare, and it's worth the
Damn.
wait. WEIGHT. It's worth the wait.
So what makes that snare so special? Tell me about that.
So it's a hybrid shell of maple and birch. So you get the both best of both worlds. The birch kind of gives you that high end cut to cut through the mix, but the maple gives it that warmth. I've always been a fan of heavy snares. Like, I don't
Mm,
know where that came from, but just the solidness when I hit a snare and it doesn't move. And especially with it being a depth of 7 inches, you get a little bit more body out of it than you would in a 5 or 6.5 snare. So you take the thickness of the snare with the combination of the woods and the depth of that snare, it becomes the perfect snare because if I tune it up, you get a nice pop, but you still get the girth of a big body snare.
mm.
Um, and so that's just kind of been my go-to. I've had that snare since 2017. It's been around the world with me at least 3 or 4 times. And I'll still get teased from guys older than me or even younger who would just use the backline stuff. And here I come with my cymbal bag and this heavy 25-pound snare. And they're like, why you bring that thing? And then as soon as I put it on in sound check, they're like, oh, I'll give you a quick story. Walt, sound guy ain't too proud. We're in Schenectady, we're teching Ain't Too Proud, and I brought 3 snares. I brought the one that matched the kit, I brought the 20 ply, and I brought a brass snare. I brought the brass shell simply because you were using a brass shell on Broadway. And I hit Walt. I was like, hey man, I bought 3 different snares with me. I kind of want to try this 20 ply snare. He was like, okay, let's. And matter of fact, installed the 20 ply. I hit it 3 times. And Steve got on the intercom and was like, don't use anything else but that snare.
Mm.
Steve is one of those individuals of discerning tastes. Like, he knows what good drums sound like. He's been around, he's worked with the best. He knows when drums are tuned. He knows when anything is wrong just by listening for it. And so it was a huge compliment for him to be like, yeah, you can use that snare anytime. Like, anytime I'm mixing anything, you bring that one. So that was kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
you
yeah,
got to. I want to see that again.
send you what?
Sure, you took a picture of the 20 ply, or send me a picture of the snare.
I wasn't gonna do that. But yeah.
I will gladly send you this wonderful
Oh, you want to
sweatshirt
trade?
for that 20 ply snare. I just want to try it. Just, can I
Okay.
just
All right. Don't hold your breath on that one, bro.
yeah, I'll give it
Hold
back
your
to you,
breath.
man. I got you.
Yeah. I come and find you. I come and find you.
Yeah,
That's so
so
good.
the thing is, I don't think I've ever let anybody borrow any equipment of mine because number one, I didn't really have that much equipment to lend out. I actually let me use some of his Peisty cymbals when he got me connected to Peisty because I didn't know anything about him. Say, try this, try this.
Mhm.
So he let me a bunch. I'm like, oh man, this is cool. I like this series. I
Yeah.
gave them back to him. He said, sometimes you don't give them back. I'm like, man, why would you take somebody's equipment?
It and that's one of the main reasons I say no. A lot of times, like, I really have, like, if once I'm in the city and you call me like, hey Q, I need to ride somewhere, I need a snare. It's you. I know you, I trust you. We've had conversation, but a lot of times, it says a lot about a person how they take care of their own things. And I know how particular I am about my gear. Even out here on this tour, I do regular maintenance where I take all of the heads off, I dust them, I vacuum the carpet, make sure everything is maintained because I feel like that's also a part of my responsibility of this chair, whether it's my drum set or not, it is my responsibility. I'm really big on maintenance. For me, it's cathartic. It also allows me to ascertain if something needs to be changed, if something is rattling. A lot of don't take the same pride in their own gear in that same way. If you don't take care of the stuff that you spent your hard money on, I know you're not going to take care of my stuff.
Mhm.
And I'd rather keep you as a friend than now we're beefing because you cracked the cymbal and gave it back to me and didn't tell me
Mm.
you cracked it. Or you dropped my snare and I got a bent lug, and then I asked you about it and you be like, oh man, it was like that when I got it. So I'd rather not do that.
But you want to worry about that with me. Just send it in the mail. Send me a copy.
My
I just
signature's already on it, Clayton. I'll send you a picture of it. It literally, like, my signature is under the lacquer. I'll let you use it.
How many Hamilton tours were there, and how many are there right now?
When we first started, there were 3 tours. It was the Philip tour, the Aunt Peggy tour, and the Angelica tour. Since then, there are now 2 tours. They closed the Angelica tour and they closed the Aunt Peggy tour. So we were the only tour for about a year. But this past summer, they opened up a new Angelica 2.0 tour because they found a way to condense the trucks. So that tour is same full production contract and everything, but they found a cheaper way to travel the tour. I think the goal was to spend less money on load-ins and load-outs. And one of the ways you do that is to condense the trucks that you have. I think right now our truck count is maybe 12. It used to be something like 14 or something like that. But they found a way to travel the tour, like smaller trunks. Like on this tour, myself and the percussionist, we get 2 big trunks apiece. I think on the new tour, they just get 1 drum trunk. They condense the percussion book immensely. So like the big Grand Casa, like the 36-inch bass, the chimes and all of that stuff, they sampled it and now they're on sample pads as opposed to it being the actual thing. So there are now 2 national tours. And so right now it feels like an East Coast tour and a West Coast tour because we've been on the West Coast since August. And so we stay on the West Coast, and it just kind of seems like the new tour is doing a lot of East Coast, and they're doing smaller residencies as well. Like we're in the midst of a 6-week residency, and we just came out of 2 other cities where we did 6-week residencies, and they are doing like 2-week tours. Here, I think they got a couple of 1-weekers sprinkled in there. This tour doesn't do anything less than 2 weeks in the city, so I think that we're trying to find a way to condense it so that they can go into some smaller markets. And so they're playing cities like Greenville, Arkansas, Hershey, Pennsylvania, which aren't major markets, and we typically stay in more of the major markets.
When does this tour wrap up?
I have dates until June 1st of 2025.
Now, when you're on tour, I learned this when I had the opportunity to sub at the very last minute for the drummer that was playing Hadestown. I hadn't been
Mhm.
on a Broadway tour since I first started in the year 2000, but man, not only does it pay well if you get overages, it's wonderful, especially if it's a nice tour.
Mhm.
But I didn't realize the things that you have to do. Now, I remember you posted on your Instagram a while ago some footage of you, I think, setting up your stuff and maybe breaking it down. I didn't
Mhm.
realize you had to do that until
Mhm.
I had to do it myself. I came in there and subbed and I stayed there for a week and then I like, okay, this is what you do. You take everything, you break everything down and you put it into the what are they called again?
The
The
drum come.
yes. Tell me, since you have so much equipment, do you have a specific method to do that? Tell everybody what that really is like when you finish a show on the Sunday night. What's your MO and how do you make all that stuff happen?
A good question. So going back to Detroit, my first loadout took me 3 hours.
Really?
Yeah. Well, because it wasn't my kit yet. I hadn't done any of like it was brand new, and the backstage area was very small. So you had wardrobe, hair, and audio all utilizing the same space. And my trunks are like 8 feet tall. And, when the doors are open, at least 6 feet wide. So if I had my drum trunks open, no one else could get down the corridor. So it was just kind of like that. Um, t- at this point, my breakdown takes about an hour because I have memory locks on everything. I have a system. Um, so usually what happens the before the last show, I'll bring out my cymbal bag and anything that has to be packed up first, smaller items. I'll get those cases ready and lay it out. So and the minute the show is over, I am, wrap up my ears, put my ears away, and the first thing that comes down are the cymbals. Like once the cymbals are down, then like the engine of the kit is kind of exposed. From there, I take drums off because once I get the drums off, the kit is 50% broken down. I was at PASIC. I did PASIC this year, and everybody was coming by, like looking at the kit because I played some cuts from Hamilton, so I had the Hamilton kit out there, and everyone like, "Oh my God, it's such a huge kit." And I was like, "It's." The running joke was, it's not a big kit. It's a 5-piece kit with 4 snares. That was the and when you sit behind it, it makes all of the sense in the world. It's not a huge kit. It just looks that way because, drums take up space. But anyway, so I put the drums away and then the hardware and the electronics are the only thing that's left. And gratefully, I'm on a rack. So, it's not a total tear down. Like the rack is in 3 pieces. So you take off the crossbars and I take the legs, put those in one trunk. All of the smaller simple boom arms go into another, snare stands go up. In about an hour, if we end the show at 4, I'm walking out of the theater at about 5.
Hmm.
And the only time that it would take longer is if, like in this city, it won't take long at all because my drum trunks are literally right behind me. If it takes longer, it's usually because the drums are in a different location than the drum trunks or there are stairs involved. But I don't mind that. For me, it's almost kind of like the commencement of a city. For me to break down the kit is almost kind of like the graduation of one city going on to the next. So it allows me to prepare the kit for the next city. So when I get into the next city, even if I take a little bit more time on the loadout, it makes my load in that much easier in the next city.
Do you wind up sitting down during this whole process of taking off the cymbals and just putting down, or do you stand up doing it?
It's a combination of both, only because my booth, I can't stand straight up. I'm about 6 feet. So like I can't stand straight up in my booth, which means that I kind of have to do this. And if you're doing this for any amount of time, you're putting pressure on your spine and then your lower back. So whenever I can, so typically I'll take the cymbal, I'll stay seated, put my ears up, grab the cymbals off, put those down, and then start, unloosening everything. So it's just a quick pull. And depending on what the cases are, what I may do is stack the drums up. If the trunks aren't close, I'll stack the drums up on the outside of the booth, and then disassemble everything and then start moving things almost kind of like an assembly line type thing. But because I can't stand straight up in the booth, it can become very painful on your back.
Are your drum booths always in the pit?
Depends on the city. Um, Whenever they can, I'm in the pit. In certain cities, it's just not feasible. Like in San Francisco, my drums wouldn't. So every show that comes to the Orpheum, there's a dedicated drum room. Just like in LA, there's a drum room. In San Fran, I'm not even in a booth. There are other places where I've been, like the Majestic in San Antonio. I was remote, but I was in a booth, but I was actually in a dressing room. They assembled the booth in a dressing room because my booth is also acoustically treated. Because you put drums in a room that's not acoustically treated, you're going to have more problems than not. So, but this tour, their goal, and I know a lot of new tours are going out, like the band is remote 100% of the time, not just the drummer. Like in Juliet, it's remote, which kind of makes sense to me just because most of the time on Broadway, especially in the older houses, the bands are remote anyway. I remember the first time I walked into the Hamilton's booth, like Andres is essentially in a closet to the left. You walk in and it's like this door, and then his drums are there, and it's just enough room for his drums. Even with Ain't Too Proud, I don't know if there was a pit per se. I think everybody was just kind of in their own little sections remote. But this tour, I do enjoy different aspects. I enjoy being in the pit because to be able to see my other orchestra mates and to actually feel the energy in real time from the audience. Although I'm in the booth, I can still feel the adulation and the crowd response. And typically I can feel the subs. Like I like feeling like the kick drum and the floor tom and the subs.
There's a skit on Key and Peele where they actually, it's like, and if you,
Yeah.
and they're both talking over each
No,
other.
you go. No, you but no. Yeah.
And they get so upset. And I don't want to go how it ends. It's really funny, but it's kind of screwed up with the way that they do it. But anyway, coming from your background and my background too. Now it's every generation has their way of doing things.
Hmm.
A lot of younger musicians want to play in the drum booth and they just want to
Hmm.
be in the drum booth playing show tunes. I mean, it's not really it's funny calling Ain't Too Proud and Juliet and Hamilton and Book of Mormon show tunes,
Sure.
but when you kick that bass drum, now you know what it's like playing in big venues. It's
Hmm.
fantastic when you hear that sound coming through the speakers and then the crowd reacts to you. It's that the energy that you get from each other.
Hmm.
And you really don't get that playing in a lot of pits unless you can kind of feel it. Like with Ain't Too Proud, I couldn't feel it until we obviously went on stage and you could see it and you're there on stage. When Andres has his booth is over to the side and he can kind of hear it because it's under the stage to a certain degree.
Hmm.
When you're playing in a pit and you're remote, like I was doing for Hades Town, there were times where I was so far away from the pit and so far away from the stage, it would take me almost a minute to get to the stage to play the last number.
Hmm.
I felt so segregated. How do you deal with that lack of camaraderie and lack of musicianship, I guess, when you're so far away? Like, do you find ways to try to adapt to it to make it more more real? And does it bother you at all?
It doesn't bother me, and I'll tell you why. And I say this to a lot of young musicians, or even just musicians that want to try to pivot into the Broadway world. And they're like, "Well, I want to play shows." I was like, "Okay, well, you got to go and get some experience. You just can't come here straight out of school thinking that there are experiences that you can draw from." And the reason why I say that is because typically when I am remote, I draw from the experience of being in a studio session. I draw from playing in these large churches where I am in essentially in a cage or a bubble or some type of sound booth. So I pull from my experiences in that way. Every now and again, you'll get into a collaborative music studio session where everybody is in the room, but by and large, drums are always isolated. And you got to find a way to make it feel like you're not isolated, right? So pulling from that experience as a studio musician, I feel like I'm just doing a live recording every night, so still being able to emit that same feeling and passion as if I am dead smack in the middle of the stage at Paul Brown's for 70,000 fans, like it really doesn't bother me because I've been able to adapt into so many different situations. Like I'm not just a live player, I'm also a studio player, so for me, it's just like being at a session you know and so there is a lot like I in my avium I do have like audience mic, so I can kind of dial in a little bit of that if I need that. But for me it's about the work, and I've been fortunate enough that the two tours that I've done have been so drum heavy, and the drum books are so great. The drum book is enough. Like I don't need the adulation of the audience. Like I get hyped just knowing that I get to play this music today. So for me it's about finding enjoyment in the thing that I'm doing as opposed to the response of the crowd. There was a producer that was saying, you know as a musician or a creative, like you create your art for you. The audience is paying to be in your presence while you're creating this art. So my connection to the music absolutely has nothing to do with the 3,000 people that are sitting out there. Whether it was three people out there or 3,000 people out there, it doesn't matter to me. I'm going to play the same way. I'm going to emit the same emotion, and I'm going to use it, play with the same execution and intentionality that I would if the theater is packed. My joy doesn't necessarily come from a location. I know there's so many guys like, man, I don't see how you do it. How you playing this booth every night? Well, I love what I do. I love the music. Like, I don't need that. And if you can pull from different experiences to kind of be like, oh, okay, this kind of reminds me of when I'm in the studio. How do I act when I'm in the studio? You know, like, and now having my own studio back in Atlanta, I would get called in to do a bunch of remote sessions. When I'm playing drums remotely, like it can't sound like me and the bass player is 3,000 miles away, so just pulling from those experiences.
So if somebody doesn't have the experience of playing a recording session and they haven't had the experience of playing in front of 1,000, 70,000, all they want to do, they came from music school and they're
Mhm.
like, I want to go from music school right to the drum booth.
I mean, you could do that, but you can try to do that, but I always say this, and I get pushback from some people, but Broadway music is not a genre. Broadway music is a subgenre of genres. So if you're doing a rock musical, you would have had to be adept and versed in rock music. You got to go and be into rock bands.
Mm.
There's nothing about Ain't Too Proud that I learned in school or on Broadway. Where I learned how to approach the music for Ain't Too Proud? Playing in wedding bands where half of the night you're playing top 40 Motown stuff anyway. So understanding how to play that six-stroke roll. The only difference is it's intellectualized by being on music, but you still got to be able to intellectually interpret what that means in that course, understanding that Ain't Too Proud the musical was essentially an enhanced Temptations rock show, with that rock energy, but also understanding how the Funk Brothers approach that music. And I learned that from having to learn Ain't Too Proud to Beg to play for a reception, not for a musical. So the experiences that you are able to bring to a drum chair on Broadway brings levity to the drum chair, and being able to pull from different experiences make the experience that much more authentic. If you're coming straight from school, and there's nothing wrong with that, if you can get it, fine, but you got to be able to bring some experiences with it. Like the Hamilton book is full of references to different genres and different drummers. Like one of the King songs, it literally says Purdy-esque shuffle.
Who's Bernard Purdy?
Who's Bernard Purdy? If you don't know who Bernard Purdy is, what you're reading, you're not going to
Mm.
interpret the right way, because
Mm.
how it was written is correct. But if you don't understand that what that shuffle means, you're going to interpret it wrong. It's a la D'Angelo. You're like, oh,
Really?
okay. So that means I could read it correctly, but if I don't know that the 16th notes that are written there in the kick drum are supposed to be really close together, a la Questlove, who recorded that D'Angelo stuff,
Mm.
or like Dilla. So you got the lazy hats,
Mm.
but you can't write lazy hats because everything sits on a grid in the music.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
understanding those references, I didn't learn who D'Angelo was by playing Broadway. I
Mm.
learned that by playing at the club, and it was like, well, we're gonna do Untitled. How does it feel on the Voodoo album, or Brown Sugar? You know, Like, so there are experiences that you got to bring, whether it be you, whether it be Sean McDaniel, whether it be Damian Bassman, all of you guys are bringing all of these various experiences to these chairs that you create. So it's not just about being able to read and play well. It's also about bringing those other experiences from other aspects of your musical career to the chair, because that's what brings levity to the chair. How you approached Ain't Too Proud was perfect based on you understood the assignment of what was needed, but also is historically correct in some of the things that you wrote out, like where you put the six stroke rolls. You know, I've like there's some people like you could take a six stroke roll and put it in the wrong place and it becomes a distraction as opposed to making a difference.
Right.
But sometimes the experience means more than the actual academics of going to school,
Mm,
you know, because in school you learn what to do. In real world experiences, you know what you learn what not to do. And sometimes learning what not to do is more important than what to do. Because if
mm,
I know what not to do, it kind of leads me exactly to what I should be doing. You know, and you
right.
don't learn that in school because there are so many real world situations that you have to experience to be able to understand what to do. And a lot of times you get a split second to adapt and understand what happens in a situation. If you've never played in a situation where the backing tracks go out or the click track goes out and you don't know how to play and keep things in time, when that click track goes off or Ableton, the computer shuts down or something happens and you don't know what to do, or something happens on stage where an actor misses a cue in a vamp, and now you got to watch the conductor, but you've never done that in real time.
Or listen to the band when everyone's trying to get on the same page. When the bass players measure ahead and the guitar players is like, then we all have to listen to each other to figure out how we're going to get back. And by the next measure, we're all on the same page because we've listened to each other. We know
And
how to.
nobody in the audience ever knew a thing
Right.
happened.
I got to tell you one quick story.
Yeah.
Speaking about playing things authentically, I still have this. I should probably screenshot this in case it's ever taken down. It was July 20th of 2019. I got this DM from this credible drummer who's no longer with us. He said, "You sound amazing, bro.
And
I
yeah,
enjo-
yeah,
I enjoyed you and the entire production so much. God bless you." I said, "Oh man, thanks. That means a lot coming from you. I
yeah.
appreciate that." He said, "I was there with my wife for this 2 p.m. show. Both you and your drums sounded freaking authentic, man. I really enjoyed everything. There was some air and
Aaron Spears.
I'm like, that really meant something to me to
Yeah,
sound authentic."
yeah.
And that, like you said, it doesn't come from because I didn't go to music school, number one. But
Mhm,
the reason why I keep bringing this up is because there are so many people that want to do what we do,
mhm.
and they just all they want to do is play Broadway, and they just don't see the need to have those experiences. Why do I need that? I'm going to play the music that's right in front of me. I can do that. But like you explained, it makes more sense when you say when the music says play it a la Funk Brothers or D'Angelo or Motley Crue or like who the fuck is Motley Crue? Jesse Ray Leach,
Mhm.
who loves Paramore, and
Paramore, favorite band.
I saw him playing a bunch of rock stuff. Like, who is this guy playing? He sounds great,
Yeah.
but he wants to play shows, and he did Mr. Saturday Night and K-pop and all kind of stuff, and he's subbing for MJ now and for a bunch of different things. But he's played music before. Which makes him more qualified, in my opinion, to play the music that we play on Broadway. I remember talking
100%.
to Sean McDaniel. He was like, he grew up on Motley Crue. It's like, you like Motley Crue? And it shows you how versatile he is to play
Yes.
girl playing that stuff and one to have the big hair. And but he's played created Book of Mormon and the Hamilton book, and
And
he's doing all,
Frozen
yeah, and
and
Frozen and all kind
he's
of
doing
stuff.
Smash Now, Cabaret, Some Like It Hot. I'm a Sean McDaniel fan and the sweetest guy that you ever want to meet too. Like just a gentleman at heart, has a heart of gold, but I think he grows to be 9 feet and he gets gangly teeth anytime he sits behind his set because he's an absolute beast. The versatility that you speak of, like to go from creating a show, a drum book based in hip hop, and then go and do something so commercial like Disney,
Hmm.
but then also go into something so straight ahead and big bandish like
Something like
Some
it,
Like
huh?
It Hot.
Oh.
So I got a chance to see him back October last year. I was in New York doing this thing and I had a day off. Sammy Marandino, great friend of us, great friend of the program, got me in contact with Sean and I went and saw him play one of the last shows of Some Like It Hot.
Mm.
There's also something to be said about developing your own voice on the drums, right? It's not just about understanding genre. It's not just about understanding how to read music and interpret it, but it's also about having your own voice on drums. And the only way you get there is to spend time on the instrument. When I went and saw Sean play Some Like It Hot, there were pieces because I went inside the drum booth at Book of Mormon. I went and saw, obviously, I saw Hamilton from a drum booth, and
Mm.
I saw Some Like It Hot. And it's his vernacular, it's his voice that I hear. Like to hear the Scholar Sisters feel, but he was able to use that in a jazz context in Some Like It Hot. It actually
Mm.
happened. And I saw him, I'm sitting there watching him do it.
uh,
There's something also to be said about finding your own voice. Like when I hear Memphis the musical, when I heard Ain't Too Proud, like I hear you, like to know who you are now and to know you and to intimately know that drum book of Ain't Too Proud and then go and listen to the Memphis soundtrack. But oh yeah, that's Clayton. Like I can hear that. So there's authenticity of feel of the genre, but it's also authenticity to who you are as a person. The one thing that I've learned in both of these situations, like coming in, I haven't had the privilege of creating my own drum book officially yet, right? But the one thing I've learned about subbing, it is not just enough to imitate the person or the genre, is to understand the context and the intention behind what the person played. So even if I don't play verbatim the feel that you played, if I lock into the intention of what the original drummer meant, it will give the same type of levity to the drum part. And you
hmm.
can't do that just coming out of school. You got to go and play some drums. You got to go have some great experiences. You got to go have some bad experiences. You got to go have some in between experiences. So when you bring that stuff, you're bringing more than the technical skill of playing because so many of our drum books, technical skill is the floor. You got to be able to play drums. You got to be able to read, but that's just the price of admission. Like, what else are you bringing to the chair that makes that contractor or makes that supervisor say, I want Clayton in the chair? So I'm getting off my soapbox about that now, but I get so many guys that they don't understand that part of it. It's just like you can't, if you've never played rock while you're auditioning for a rock band or a rock musical, go out there and play some stuff. Get the experience. And I promise you it'll be better for it. What's a year of experience? And I'm just using a year as an example, but
Mm.
what's going away for a year for the rest of your life or the rest of your career?
Well, that I think people might say, well, why should I do that when all I want to do is play Broadway? I just want to play in that booth, separate from everybody else, remote, playing.
That's great. Success is not a linear path. Where you are to where you want to be is not a straight line. And there are things, and even if it was, once you get there, you're going to find yourself not being able to stay because you're not qualified to be there.
Mm.
So you got to go out there and you got to go and do all of these other things. I remember watching an interview with Walter Payton, and they were like, how do you train? He was like, oh well, I go to the gym, I lift weights. And then twice a week I take ballet lessons. Like,
Mm.
you the strong, big, burly running back, why are you taking ballet lessons? He was like, well, it teaches me balance. It teaches me how to have a low center of gravity, that all ballet dancers need to be able to have to achieve some of the moves that they do. They used to call the man sweet feet. Those sweet feet did not come from lifting weights. They came from doing something totally unrelated to what it is that he ultimately did. And so I look at it like that. Playing drums in the pit, there are so many other things that you need to know how to do. Like, we're responsible for our setup. Going to
Mm.
a gig, learning how to be effective in setting up my kit and breaking it down in a timely fashion, because I don't want the rest of the band waiting on me to get back
Yeah, I
on the
know.
bus.
Yeah, I know. Well, the thing is, I don't even know if yeah, I don't want to sound like I'm old, but kids today don't know what that's all about. They have a lot of clubs. There's a lot of backline already, especially in New
Hmm.
York, which is a great thing.
Hmm.
But you take your drums out of your rehearsal room, you put them in your car, you take them out of the car, you put it on a cart, you bring it through the venue, you take the drums out of the cases, you set them up, you make sure they sound right, then you play for 4 hours or whatever the gig is. Then you got to break them down and do that whole thing over again. I don't know if people do that very much because again, why would I want to do that when all I want to do is play in Broadway pit?
Okay, so I'll counter with this. Because I broke those drums down and because I set them up, I know that drum kit. So in the middle of one of those shows that you're coveting, when something starts rattling,
Mm,
based on the rattle, I know exactly where I need to go to fix that in real time.
yeah, yeah.
But if I don't have that experience, now I got audio on the phone like, hey, we got a rattle going on down there in drums. Like, what's going on? So just based off of that experience of setting up your kit and breaking down your kit, you learned things. You learn not only things about the gear, you learn things about yourself. You learn how you fit in this whole thing that we call music. It's not binary. Me playing drums in a pit is not a binary thing. It is very
Mm,
much, there are terrains, there are things that you have to navigate. It's not only gear, it's not only music, it's also navigating personalities. I encounter in my music career when I get into certain situations, if I've been able to see, if I've been on stage with a prima donna, eye on the edge of confrontation guitarist before, what higher pressure situation is it than a sits pro when you've only had 2 days to learn 50 songs
hmm
and somebody's getting something wrong, and I'm looking at this guitar player getting ready to pop off. The reason why I know he's getting ready to pop off is because I've seen it before. So I
hmm
know how to temper my own self and put myself in a situation where that doesn't become a thing. The more experiences you have leads
Yeah.
you to your next. And I think we we besmirch where we are and where we've been because it's not where we want to be. And I think a lot of times when we discount where we are and where we've been, we miss the lessons in that. We forfeit those lessons because all of those lessons help us get to our next. Like understanding how the decorum that I'm supposed to have in a choreography rehearsal came from me being 5 and 6 years old, playing in choir rehearsal and noodling on the drums while the choir director's trying to teach a part. And the choir director coming over to me and was like, hey, when I'm teaching parts, I don't need you doing that.
hmm
I learned that lesson at 5, right? I didn't learn that in school. I learned that
Mm.
in the real world. So now when I'm sitting in a choreography boot camp and Sergio is barking orders at the choreography team, like I know not to play a thing, but also be engaged and listening. So when he says ready and, I know exactly where we're starting and I know exactly where we're going. Those are real world situations that you can't stimulate in school.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start talking about coming out into the real world, doing real world things, and you don't have that experience, you're going to find yourself chewed up and spit out on the side of the road, and you're not going to understand why. And then you become bitter because you're like, well, I play drums better than that person. Well, because
Right.
you forfeited the experiences that you could have had because you only wanted to do this one thing. Now,
Mm.
if you're blessed enough to do that one thing, cool. And maybe someone is patient enough with you to let you learn on the job. But
Mm.
you should not go through life thinking that someone's gonna give you this rope. Because the minute I guarantee you, you go into a workshop screwing up 2 days in a row, your drums are gonna be by the door and you're gonna see somebody else willing their drum set in, asking you where to set up. I'm reminded of a quote in an interview that I heard Denzel Washington say. He was like, if you hang around 5 millionaires, you'll be the sixth.
Mm.
He's like, if you hang around 5 fools, you'll be the sixth. You
Mm.
know, I think a part of that is also generational because there is no doubt that today's generation of musician, they come out of the womb with far more experience, far more technical ability. Like they just have it, right? But with that, there comes a level of ego because of our society in this microwave mentality. We don't want to work for it, because you got to let go of your ego to actively go into a situation where you're not the best person because there's a level of acquiescing and placation that you have to do to the senior musician or to the musician that's better than you to learn. In order to learn, you have to put yourself in a place of, I don't know.
Mm.
And I don't think that's very popular talk now. Everything is wonderful. I'm the best at this. And you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, look at
Um,
me.
right. When I realized that I wanted to start playing musicals, the first thing I didn't start flying myself to New York immediately. I looked at my situation and was like, okay, where can I get better? What do I need to do? And the first thing I went and did, I went and took a refresher course on music theory because I knew that in order to do what I wanted to do, there were some other things that I had to get taken care of first. So when I got the opportunity, I wouldn't blow it. So that is an example of, okay, if I want to go this way, but first I got to go here to get this taken care of. And that might be, okay, I'm interested in rock musicals. And then also there's also knowing yourself well enough to know, okay, if I get offered a musical that might not necessarily be in my wheelhouse, maybe I should say no to that musical, you know, but it's written, I should be able to play it. No,
Mm.
because you don't have the experience to understand that, okay, this music calls for a more traditional boom chick Broadway thing. If I'm not versed in that, I don't know how to tune the drums for that. I don't know what the equipment choices are going to be able to emit that sound, you know, or even if I'm given the instruments, what do I need to do to manipulate these instruments? Going back to
Mm-hmm.
setting up and breaking down, tuning this instrument for a jazz band or a big band versus tuning this instrument to go and play Hamilton or and Juliet or Ain't Too Proud. Same instrument, different tunings, emit different levels of authenticity. Then
Listen.
understanding the variances of that. There's an icebreaker question that I love asking when I first meet people. And the question is, would you rather be the best player on a bad team or the worst player on a great team?
Mm.
And it's very interesting to hear some the answers and the reasoning behind it. But it just kind of goes to that point, like if it's ego involved, oh yeah, I want to be the best player because if I'm the best player, I'm gonna get the most shots, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna have all of the light on me versus the person, no, I want to be on the best team and I'll be the worst player. And some of it is not from a place of, oh, I want to be better, but it's more like, well, if they the best team on the worst player, I'm not gonna play, I'm gonna still get all of the benefits that they do.
Mm.
So still like with all of that thing being said, there are so many different things as Broadway musicians that you have to have, or just musicians in general. And intention is one of them, not only musically, but from a humanistic standpoint as well. Like having the right intention. Why do you want to play Broadway music? Is it just because it's the easier bag? Is it just because it's probably one of the last protected ways of being a musician? Why is it? What's your intention behind it? What's your underlying reason why you want to play a musical? And if it is just because you like, because it's cool, you're gonna quit. You're gonna flame out because your intentions aren't pure.
Mm.
You know, I play musicals. I like playing Broadway because I'm a theater kid. I grew up as an actor. I enjoy playing music, but I also really love playing drums. I chose music theater, music chose me. So having the ability to push both of those things together, I get to live up my dream of playing both passions that I have. And a lot of people in this world don't do that. Some can't even do what they love one time. I get to do it twice every day. So what that does, that gives me the passion to push even when I don't feel well, even when I'm depressed, even when I don't want to do it. My love for what it is that I'm doing, it goes so much deeper than a paycheck. It goes so much deeper than I think it looks cool. It's a part of my story. It's a part of what I love to do. So also, it's also the intention behind it. So I started asking that question. Oh man, I want to do what you're doing. Why? Because the last thing I did got 5,000 views. What, you like the attention of the articles? You like playing a big drum kit? You like the attention that it comes with? Why do you want to do it? And until you can answer that question, like I think you need to stay away from it because you do yourself so much more harm and you become one of these better musicians that can't say an encouraging word because it didn't work out for you. And the reason why it didn't work out for you is because your intentions weren't pure. This industry has a way of exposing that. It might not happen overnight, but if your intentions are not pure, music has to win out. Music has to be the reason why you do it. Not because of the fame, not because of the money, not because of the protected employment. It has to be because it's what you believe you were put on this earth to do. And I believe that's why I've had somewhat of a meteoric rise in what I'm doing, simply because it's coming from a pure place. I love what I do. I enjoy what I do. And even when I'm not having a great day, the silver lining to the darkest day is that I get to play this music.
I want to ask you about your sweatshirt, Got Pocket.
Yes,
Tell
Got
me about
Pocket.
that is.
Got Pocket is a brand by a good friend of mine. His name is J. Rod Sullivan, currently playing drums with Janet Jackson. He copyrighted Got Pocket a few years ago. If you remember, it's kind of a play on the Got Milk slogan. And essentially, for those who don't know, Pocket is doing what the music requires, making sure that you lay a foundation for other musicians to build on top of, staying in the pocket. To be a pocket player means that you are giving substance to the music. So, Got Pocket is his brand, and I proudly rock it whenever I can to bring awareness to my boy's clothing line. And you can go to gotpocket.com and check out all of you got sweats, you got t-shirts, you got shorts, you got all of these different things. I got to connect you with them so you guys can do some cross pollination and cross marketing things. Although he's not playing Broadway music, I think still, you guys should know each other. But yeah, Got Pocket, go and check it out.
Where can people find you on the internet?
www.iamqrobinson.com, at Q Groovin on Instagram, and Quinton J. Robinson on Facebook. Since we're talking about brands, I have a drum key. I believe Clayton has one of them.
Yes,
It
sir.
is it's a drum key with a magnet and a drill bit at a top. This is the first of its kind. Most only have either a magnet or a drill bit. This one has both. You can find them at the Atlanta Drum Shop where you can go right to my website and it will hyperlink you right to where they are available for sale.
How much do they run?
I believe they're 24.99.
All
Great
right.
stocking stuffer. And then also my custom drumstick from ProMark is available at the Atlanta Drum Shop, in store or online.
What is there a certain size of the drumstick?
So my drumstick is based off of their Finesse 718, which is, remember that old ProMark Acid Jazz?
Kind of.
They re Yeah, they rebranded it as the Finesse 718. It's about a 5A grip. What makes mine custom is it's a heavier weight. So it's
Mm,
a 5B weight, but it
okay.
has a 5A grip and it's 16 1/4 inches long.
Good.
And so I needed something with a little versatility. So like with the grip gives me if I need to do some like straight ahead real quick, but
Hmm.
with the weight, if I need to do some backbeat stuff, as you know, in Hamilton, you kind of go through a few different genres of music. So having a particular drumstick, depending on where I choke up on it, or lay back on it, it gives me a different feel. Shout out to Aaron Vistria and the whole team over at ProMark by Diodario for working with me on that. And yeah, got really good feedback about that. And hopefully one day we can turn that into a signature drumstick at some point.
So it's IAM Q
Mhm.
Robinson.
.com.
All right. It was always a pleasure speaking with you. And I'm glad we had this conversation and updated this podcast because there was so much you've
I'm
done
putting this on
since
my resume. You don't know
December
who I
20.
am? I talked to Clayton Craddock.
Oh man, I'm glad we caught up again, and hopefully I'll catch up with you in person again sometime. Last time we saw each other, I was in Miami and you were in Miami,
Mhm.
but we'll see each other sometime soon.